As it relates to your meeting that's coming up with President Xi, what do you hope comes out of that meeting? What deliverables come
I think we'll make a deal. I think we're going to make a deal on the rare earth is the least of it. Look, the tariffs are much more powerful than the rare earth. The rare earth is a disturbance, but there's a lot of rare earth around. I'll tell you, I've had more calls on rare earth. We've got it. Everybody's. We'll make a deal on, I think, everything. I think we're going to make a deal on soybeans and the farmers. I think we're going to make a deal on maybe even nuclear. You know, President Putin in his call mentioned to me about nuclear, where we do a de-escalation, and I'm fine with that. I think it's good. I think it's a very appropriate thing. We have the most nuclear weapons. Russia's second. China is actually third by a long way, but they'll be even within 4 or 5 years. Too many. And we are talking about de-escalation. That's already being talked about.
Can you convince
And I think we'll probably add China into the mix.
Mr. President, can you convince President Xi to stop purchasing all of that Russian oil that's funding this war against Ukraine?
Well, I think I'll be talking to him about it. I think it's a little bit of a different talk. India, as you know, has told me they are stop. You know, it's a process. You can't just stop it. But by the end of the year, they'll be down to almost nothing. That's a big thing. That was almost 40% of the oil. India, they've been great. Spoke to Prime Minister Modi yesterday. They've been absolutely great. China's a little bit different. You know, they're a little bit different relationship they have with Russia. It was never good, but because of Biden and Obama, they got forced together. They should never have been forced together, but they're a little bit forced. But they're by nature, they're not. They can't be friendly. They can't be friendly. By nature, I hope they are friendly, frankly, but they can't be. You should not have forced Russia and China together. And Biden did that, and Obama did that. They forced them together because of energy, because of oil. And so they are closer than they would normally be. I think I'll probably be talking about it. What I'll really be talking to him about is how do we end the war with Russia and Ukraine, whether it's through oil or energy or anything else. And I think he's going to be very receptive. He would now like to. I'm not sure that he did at the beginning. He would now like to see that war end.
Do you think Xi plays an important role, Mr. President? Do you think Xi plays an important role in terms of inserting himself and convincing Putin, who he speaks to regularly, to stop the war?
Yeah, I do. I think he can have a big influence on Putin. I think he can have a big influence on a lot of people. Look, he's a respected man. He's a very strong leader of a very big country. Yeah, I think he can have a big influence, and we will certainly be talking about Russia, Ukraine.
In the
back.
Thank you, Mr. President. Liam Cosgrove with Zero Hedge. My question is actually for the Secretary General.
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, I don't know if you've seen this, but polling out of Ukraine shows a massive collapse in Ukrainian support for the war. A Gallup poll had it just 23%. That's less than a quarter. Zelensky came out today praising President Trump's proposal for freezing
Yes.
the front lines of battle as part of a ceasefire. He said that's a good compromise. So people view your coming here as, you know, you're lobbying the U.S. government to continue its involvement in the war. You're obviously lobbying for more NATO weapons to be sent to Ukraine, but Ukrainians themselves don't want to fight the war. So how do you justify that morally?
Well, I'm lobbying only for one thing, and that is to make sure that we end this war. And I don't have to lobby the president because we totally agree on this. And this is what he has been doing from day one. Everything he could do to break the deadlock with Putin, get a dialogue going, dialoguing also with Zelensky, and getting this war done. It's crucial. And the fact that the US is now supplying weapons into Ukraine, paid for by allies, is extremely important. And that's now happening since 2-3 months. About 2 billion moving into Ukraine.
The war hasn't wind down. Why do you think that'll wind it down now?
What do you mean?
You think more weapons will wind down the war?
No, I mean, there's more to be done. So what you need, what the president said this weekend, stop where you are, so basically do a ceasefire and then have all your discussions about territory and whatever. But first, stop the war. This is what you said on Friday and on Sunday.
It's a war. I mean, your question's really a fair one. It's a war that should have never started.
And
you know how I feel about it.
But
it's a war that should have never started. And we're not selling any weapons to Ukraine. We're selling them to NATO, which is different from before. With Biden, he just gave $350 billion worth of weapons and cash right into Ukraine, and that was so foolish. But we sell them to NATO, and in theory, you can do what you want with them. It doesn't have to be Ukraine, but probably it is mostly.
No, what nations are doing now is buying from this program and making sure that the supplies in
Europe.
Ukraine, so Europeans and Canadians. And for example, these are interceptors for the Patriot systems, crucial to protect the cities. Today, again, a Russian attack has killed children, at least seriously wounded children in a kindergarten in Ukraine. So we need to make sure that the air defense systems are in place, and we need the US systems to do that, and the Europeans are paying for that. And this is exactly the type of actions we needed, and the President is doing that, and trying everything to get this war to an end, starting with the ceasefire.
You can say
Do you
definitively
still
not lobbying an
believe that
immediate war.
Putin wants to take all of Ukraine?
I always felt that way. I always felt he wanted to. When I was in my first term, I was with, I was very close to him, relatively speaking. It was harder because of the Russia hoax. But I would talk to President Putin about Ukraine, and it was the apple of his eye. I'd say it was the apple of his eye, but it would have never happened. He knew the consequences were too great. When we had a rigged election and all of a sudden I wasn't there, he said, wow. I think he looked at Afghanistan, how horribly that was handled, so stupidly. And I think that really gave him a little additional, incentive. I always felt he wanted the whole thing, not a piece of it. But I think now he's willing to negotiate a little bit further, and I think he's willing to make a deal. We'll see.
Mr. President,
We don't want him. We don't want him to have the whole thing.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have this big tariffs case before the Supreme Court. It's November the 5th.
Yeah.
You suggested that you might actually show up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I'd like
for
to.
oral
I think
arguments.
it's one of the most important decisions we'll ever have from the Supreme Court. With tariffs, we're a strong, sound country. We're a nationally secure and internationally secure country. We're a very rich country. Without tariffs, it's a slog for this country, a big slog. I think it's one of the most important decisions in the history of the Supreme Court. And I might go there. I really believe I have an obligation to go there. We are doing so well as a country right now because of tariffs. And you have to understand, tariffs have been used against us for many years, decades, and just slowly but surely hurting our country so badly. That's why we owe $37 trillion. We owe that because other countries have taken advantage of us over many, many decades, And now we're a rich country. We're taking in money like we've never done before. Without tariffs, that would not be happening. And also, I solved, as you know, 8 wars. Of the 8, 5 of them, maybe even 6 of them, are because of tariffs. The threat of tariffs on these nations, if you want to fight, that's okay. India and Pakistan. If you want to fight, that's okay. But you're going to pay tariffs, and they're going to be very substantial. And we're in the midst of a trade deal. And they said, we don't want to do that. 2 days later, they call up, and they're not going to fight anymore. They have peace. But I've done that out of 8, I would say 6 times, 5 times, 6 times. Tariffs are vital to this country. And tariffs have been used against us by China, by every other country, and all we're doing is using them to negotiate fair deals. And as you know, we made a fair deal with Japan, we made a fair deal with all of Europe, the European Union. We made a fair deal with South Korea. These are countries that were taking so much money away from us, not sustainable, and now we're taking in hundreds of billions and even trillions of dollars. If this country is not allowed to have tariffs, if this country is not allowed to have the President of the United States negotiate on behalf of it with tariffs, we are put in a position where we're going to be a third world country. We can't let that happen. I think it's the most important case that we're going to have for many, many years to come. One of the most important cases we've ever had. With tariffs, we're a rich, secure country. Without tariffs, we're a laughingstock. We'll be a laughingstock. And I don't want to have anything to do with that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
For more news and updates, all you need to do is follow CNBC TV 18 on all of our digital platforms.